I'm an actor, and I love creating characters. Understanding someone else's ins and outs, their wants and desires, and getting to tell their story is thrilling to me. And I know that when I walk onto this stage in front of an audience and tell a story, that God is going to work through my creativity, along with the other actors and the audience members, to make something new that can point people to the truth. Original creativity. At the beginning of everything, God made us in his image. He is creative, so we are creative at our very origins. You see, God made every emu, elephant, wallaby, tarantula, each geode, quartz crystal and vein of gold, from Jupiter, a gas giant hurtling through space, to quarks, the smallest structural unit of an atom. God made everything. And just like God, we imagine something new and we want to bring it to reality. Whether that's Beethoven, being possessed to write symphonies that he would never hear, or Claude Monet, who had cataracts, painting blurry wall-sized images of water lilies. Or Dr. Dre, mixing beats on a MacBook. We are driven to make original things, and as Christians, we're called to do this for God's glory. We might think of the psalmist David, who wrote beautiful songs of praise and lament, or the skilled craftsman Bezalel in Exodus 31, who God called to make the articles of worship for the tabernacle. Or we might think of Georg Handel, who gave us Handel's Messiah, or John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace. And we need look no further than Hillsong or Lecrae or countless Christian filmmakers to see how we can glorify God through our creativity. Now, in America, we've been recently pushed to put a greater emphasis on our STEM education, being told that it's necessary if we want to stay competitive in a technologically advancing world. And we can argue that it is. In fact, this push might be why we are here at Virginia Polytechnic Institute. We are learning so that we can be at the forefront of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics for the next generation. Perhaps in this room tonight is the next Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, or Nikola Tesla. We are learning so that we can advance good, invent the future, and claim our role. There is a problem, though. We have separated our STEM education from our creativity. We have divided the left or technical side of our brain from the right and creative side. And this is dangerous because it puts our STEM education into a different category of our lives than our creativity and even of our faith. You see, when we think of creative people, we think of artists, we think of dancers, singers, writers, or movie makers. We do not think of chemical engineers, biologists and botanists, computer scientists, or mathematicians. Perhaps we think that we engage in creativity only as a hobby in our free time. Or worse yet, we think that we Instagram or creativity only as a consumer when we watch Netflix, scroll through Instagram, or turn on Spotify. There is just as much creativity in STEM as there are in the arts and humanities. God made the scientific principles that govern this world. And he made us in his image so that we can shape this world for his glory. We glorify God just as much when we refine aluminum that becomes airplanes as when we refine words that become worship songs. And we are just as creative and made in the image of God when we make airplanes as when we make movies and tell stories that point people to his glory. Perhaps one is pragmatic and the other isn't, but both are useful for the kingdom. And there is just as much God-glorifying creativity in the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 airplane engine hanging in Goodwin Hall as there is when a painter depicts the Passion of Jesus. We mustn't believe the lie that we can separate our creativity from our STEM education. Now, as a double major in theater arts and animal and poultry sciences, I would love to say that I have a profound ability to see the beauty of the scientific and created world within the context of the story that God is telling throughout history. But in all honesty, it's very difficult for me. And it's hard for all of us to walk in faith and see how God is reflected in our academics and our future vocation. But I would argue that tonight there is no other option, because God has called us to live out our faith in our vocations through creativity. And we can do this in two ways. First, we must change the way that we approach our daily lives. As an animal science major, I see immense beauty, complexity, and purpose in the Lord's creatures. From the single cell that gives rise to a sheep's embryo, to that same sheep full grown and eating corn out of my hand, I see the evidence of a creator that makes me want to learn more about him if I let it. And as a theater major, I see a much bigger story taking place than my own. And I rejoice at the opportunity to tell God's story of redemption and grace on the stage. But if we are going to live out our faith holistically, we must make active and intentional choices as we approach our daily lives. So if you think that chemistry is boring or pointless, it's time for you to talk to God about that. To pray to the God who created chemistry and see how hydrogen bonding reveals his might. And if you think that electrical theory is just confusing and frustrating, it's time for you to take a step back and think about how electricity reveals the character of a God who is powerful and mysterious. And if you're an architect and you think that architecture is irrelevant and your building model is pointless, it's time for you to seek inspiration through the scripture, because God called many people to be architects in the Bible. Secondly, we need to realize that God has called us to use our creativity to solve real-world problems. So to the artists tonight, God is calling you to write songs and stories and to make movies and to choreograph dances that tell people his story of redemption and grace. To the business people, he's calling you to sell and buy for his glory, to use your immense creativity and resources to advance good that makes a profit so that you can pay a single mother so that she can send her children to college. To the doctors, the computer scientists, the engineers, and the mathematicians, God is calling you to write the code that gives us the Bible app so that people can know his word in their language. He's calling you to make electrical grids that give people all around the world access to fresh water and light. He's calling you to heal the sick and restore sight and hearing to the blind and the deaf through medicine. And he's calling you to use math to reveal to people how the God of order created the universe out of nothing. We have all been made in God's image as creative people, and we've been given different gifts and abilities to live into this image. So we need to challenge and encourage one another to create to the best of our abilities in any and every field. God has called us to make new things, to solve real problems, and we can only do this through creativity. So let's go and make something new together. Thank you.